welcome back to From the Belly. I'm Duck Wheeler, and I say every episode, I am at least currently the owner and operator and instigator of this whole thing, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. Man, have I had a beautiful lineup of guests, and I've got another one that's become a friend of mine, and he is definitely a friend of the church that I attend, and we'll share a little bit of that story. Jack Mandeville, welcome to From the Belly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. Even though Jack and I are neighbors, and Jack attends the church every once in a while, and he'll tell more about that. He knows more about the church and probably more folks than I do. I've been there about a year. I met Jack on Facebook, and I didn't know anybody at First Baptist Church in McMinnville knew Jack Mandeville. And I say this every episode, I set the hook, if you will, and throw it out there, or Facebook does it for me, and the algorithm throws these people in front of me, and it learns what we want to look at. So I see all these clergy folks showing up, and then I see Jack in West Linn, and I go, okay, I'll check this guy out. And I check it out, and I'm about 3 minutes in, and this is the way it rolls for me. Some things, I can't make a decision worth a damn on some things. And other things, man, I just know, boom. And I read Jack's bio. I saw the thing, listened to a little bit, read stuff. We became friends on Facebook. He accepted, of course, my invitation. I went, yep, I want to talk to Jack. So I reached out to Jack. He said, sure, I'll talk to you. And then I started learning he's a friend of First Baptist Church in McMinnville. So, wow, that's really cool. Let me read a little of Jack's bio for you folks that don't know Jack. Jack Mandeville is a recently ordained deacon in the ELCA, which is the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, serving at West Linn Lutheran Church in Oregon. A South Carolina native, is married to his husband Chris and shares life with their spirited dog, Barbara. Jack's approach to ministry combines humor, justice-centered advocacy, and a deep sense of the sacred, grounded in both everyday life and the vast mysteries of the divine. As said before, he was raised in South Carolina, actually in Florence. I've been through Florence. I'm from Kentucky originally. So, and Jack, would you say this is true? If we had met each other in Kentucky or South Carolina or somewhere in between, we wouldn't really consider ourselves neighbors. I mean, we'd be neighbors, but be like, oh, okay, you're from South Carolina. But when you're on the West Coast
Yeah.
and you meet a Southerner, man, you're just like, dude, we're from the same hometown, which
Right.
is not the case, right?
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
Not many Southerners out here.
Not too many Southerners out here. Jack's roots instilled resilience, a commitment to equity, and a belief that humor is a spiritual practice. His theology is grounded in Lutheran tradition, enriched by Anglican liturgy and sacramental depth, and informed by Unitarian Universalist openness to multiple spiritual pathways. Mysticism is central to Jack's understanding of God. Jack believes the divine is most vividly encountered in ordinary moments, radical hospitality, and the courageous work of building inclusive communities. So, Jack, I have a story
hmm
that you shared with me of your young life. And as I read here, that you believe the divine is most vividly encountered in ordinary moments, radical hospitality, and the courageous work of building inclusive communities. Jack, you told me last week that you used to do something in a playhouse
hmm
or something in your neighborhood, and it began because I asked you, how'd you get called to this work? And you went right to that story. So would you
Yeah,
share
yeah.
that story?
Sure. As a young person, very young person, I would say probably 9 or 10 years old. On Saturdays, because on Sundays we were in our own church, but Saturdays we had our own church in my backyard, and we had a little playhouse. And on Saturdays we would play church, and we would set up our congregation of four,
Hmm.
and we would have a little makeshift altar. The altar was actually like an old door that was in one of our houses at one point. And we brought out the Kool-Aid and whatever kind of crackers we had, and I presided over communion. And funny enough, there was never any singing or sermons. We just wanted to do communion, which I think made us very theologically very liturgical. And so the Eucharist was the center of our church. And I don't remember how frequently we did it, but a fair amount. And so the people came back, the kids came back, and we did it,
That's
and it
amazing.
was great.
And these were friends of yours,
Oh
just
yeah,
neighborhood
yeah,
kids
yeah,
you
yeah.
kicked around with. And
Totally.
any of your siblings, tell us a little bit about your family of origin, and did any of your siblings participate in that?
I had an older sister, and she's 6 years older than me, so she would have been way too cool. to
Yeah.
participate in Kool-Aid Church.
All right.
So no, we she did no siblings other than just friends.
Okay. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your young church experience. So that was a Saturday church, if you will, and
Yeah,
then you went to church on Sunday.
yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that, Jack.
sure. I grew up in a very old, very historical United Methodist Church. It's 225 years old, the congregation, and it was just a very rich experience, especially for me in like the 70s when I was a kid in the church. And I think I was very much, I think I understood the presence of mysticism even at that early age, and mainly because for whatever reason that particular Methodist church was quite liturgical, and so we had the pastor wore vestments. We said the Apostles' Creed. We had responsive reading. We did all of those things in my little Methodist church. And that rhythm, that liturgy was just really had me spellbound, quite honestly. I just loved the rhythm of it. I loved that I knew that I could go every Sunday and experience that. And as time went on, I got to know the hymns, and so all of that. Even for a young kid, it was very. It did its work, right? Because liturgy and symbols are essentially supposed to point to things beyond themselves, and that's what it did to me. I didn't understand all the words or what we were saying, but there was something about the movement and the continuity that really spoke to me in this really, really ancient church, which was really, really old.
Still there, Jack?
Yes, it is still there. My family still worships there.
Wow.
My dad and my sister.
All right.
Yeah.
And Jack, did you go directly into formal ministry out of high school into college and you got a degree? Tell us a little bit about your academic pursuits and then some sense of a call, or
Mhm.
where did you end up, and then how did you arrive at where you are today? I know that's a big question.
No, no, no. That's a great question. Graduated from the University of South Carolina with a degree in international politics and history. I thought I was going to go to law school. I worked part time in a law firm in Columbia, South Carolina, and quickly learned that that was not my call. And I just didn't want to have anything to do with that. I really didn't know what I was going to do. And so I ended up in Western North Carolina working for a summer camp in that actually ended up into a full time job for the YMCA Blue Ridge Assembly in this picturesque location, and floundered there for quite a while. And ultimately, 5 years later, ended up going to graduate school to get a degree in college student personnel so I could work in colleges and universities. But I'm sorry, I should have backed up a little bit. In the mid 80s, like around 87, I was very involved in campus ministry.
Okay.
Episcopalians, Lutherans, and Methodists did campus ministry on that campus. And I mean, almost from the outset, the campus pastors were looking at me and saying, "Have you ever thought about seminary?" And I was just dumbstruck by that because I had never considered ministry for myself ever. And so I went to a national Methodist conference up in Maryland to talk. It was basically a conference to learn about considering ordained ministry. And so really the call started in the mid 80s, I should say 87. And I I got close a couple of times going when I was really young, but I think there was something in the back of my head that said, Jack, if you do this, you're going to come out here in the South, right in the middle, probably, of ordained ministry. And that's going to be a car crash. You should not do this right now. I think, well, it was God, probably, the universe, whoever you want to call it, said, don't do
Don't
this
do
now.
this.
And so I went and graduated from my graduate school at Auburn University and then worked all over the United States in higher education and overseas for a while, then came back, worked at Western Carolina University in Western North Carolina, ended up at Mississippi for a while. That call was always there. I was always involved in congregations in some way in all of those universities that I worked in all those different states. So the call never went away. It's just I just didn't pay attention to it. And when I finally took the job to come to Lewis and Clark College here in Portland, which was my last stint in higher education, the call was actually almost waiting for me. It was like, oh, wait a minute, you remember what we talked about 30 years ago? Let's talk about this again. And then it took another 7 years before I finally agreed to begin coursework and then, of course, being ordained in the ELCA. And so that's a very encapsulated version
That's
of
beautiful,
my
Jack.
story.
So I'm interested in those, all of it, but that's
Yeah.
7 years. So you said you resisted it for seven
Yeah.
years. And could you help me understand that?
Yeah,
Like what,
sure.
why and how and
Right. I resisted it because, first of all, when I soon I stayed at Lewis and Clark for like a year. So by 2017, I had resigned. I just decided I was done working in higher ed, which was fine. And uh, I was having, I wouldn't say a theological crisis, but I was having a moment where I was wanting to, I guess, discern more deeply what religious tradition I wanted to be a part of. And I connected with, I was well, just one Sunday, 2018, I went to West Hills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which is a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Southwest Portland, and just had a beautiful experience and just loved it. And connected with the Reverend Catherine Clarenbach, who is a ordained UU minister and a initiated priestess in the Stone Circle Wicca tradition. And she and I just really hit it off, and come to find out, she was a spiritual director and did lots of very deep discernment retreats. And so I attended those. And so for a while, I thought, Unitarian Universalism really sounds good, mainly because the UU tradition doesn't ask you to give up your other beliefs. So I didn't have to give up being a Christian, but I could be, I thought, well, I like that because there's a more spaciousness. And so for a while, I really thought that was my path. Ultimately, I found myself coming back to my Lutheran and even Episcopal roots because I consider myself still both Anglican and Lutheran today. I'm a hybrid. I'm a Lutheran, and I love both traditions. So I floundered again for in the wilderness for quite a while, and then just finally, I thought for a while I wanted to be an Episcopal priest. But then I realized I wasn't called to priesthood or to be a Lutheran pastor. And just more conversations with the bishop of the ELCA and other folks in the synod office of the Oregon Synod, I just realized like the diaconate, being a deacon, really more aligns with where I am. Being out there on the edges, on the fringes, where people have been burned by the church, especially queer people, but all kinds of people have been burned by the church and don't want to get anywhere close. And so I thought, how can we minister to those people who are houseless, people who don't feel comfortable walking into a church, people who don't resonate with the Christian tradition? And so I find myself, I like to use the imagery of myself going to the well and getting buckets and taking it out to people who still need water, who still need living water. They just can't walk inside because of the toxicity that the church has provided them.
say a few things about spaciousness?
Mm, yeah. I love spaciousness. I call it elbow room theologically. And I love it because I think it allows me to engage and be in spaces that are maybe not of my particular tradition, the Lutheran Anglican tradition. I'm a permanent guest of UU congregation, West Hills Unitarian Universal Fellowship. I am a permanent guest in Stone Circle Wicca. I am not Wiccan, and I'm not UU, but I just love the spaciousness that you can walk in there and just soak in different ways of being spiritual. And I really value that. Christianity, our tradition, Lutheran tradition, Anglican tradition are really wonderful, but they're just one way to think about the divine or to the experience of the divine. And I just think it's just beautiful to be able to be at the intersection of the universe, quite honestly.
Jack, what takes place at least in the Wiccan services that you've been in? Because I think that's a real trigger word for people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh God, Wiccan. I mean, witchcraft and whatever. What takes place in that space? At least the one that you attended, and you
Well,
said you're
to
a
borrow
permanent
from the
member.
word, to borrow from the words of the Reverend Catherine Clarenbach, it's not a huge leap from paganism to Christianity, quite honestly, because a lot of Christianity co-opted many of the traditions and holidays, and even quite frankly, some beliefs of Wiccan and pagan traditions. So I think any open-minded Christian could go into a Wiccan space and say, oh, you know what? This feels a little bit like All Saints Day. This feels a little bit like Easter. I think it's fairly, I mean, there's no Jesus focused, but it is still the spirit of those changing of the seasons, the holidays. I find myself very comfortable. And let me say, I'll be very clear, I'm not Wiccan, but I really appreciate the pagan traditions and what they bring.
You're a member of multiple communities.
Uh huh.
Yesterday, this is a good time to mention this. You know a woman who attends First Baptist Church named Marlene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was having a wonderful conversation with Marlene yesterday, and she mentioned the name Jack. And I
Yeah.
said, Jack Mandeville? And she said, oh, yes, Jack, my friend Jack. And I said, oh, goodness, I'm doing a podcast with Jack tomorrow. And Marlene, I'll send you when it's ready. And I sent it to Jack, and he approves. I'll send it to you. She got so excited after church, she gave me her card. Really sweet
Yeah.
card. Let's touch on that, and then I want to go back to something else you mentioned. So you're also, I think, you're a permanent member of First Baptist Church of McMinnville, which has become something that community is very important to me. I've been there
Yeah.
about a year. How
Hmm.
did that take place, and how was that a part of this
Hmm.
ordination as a deacon? And we'll talk more about that as well. But how did all that flow?
Yeah. We lived in Portland, Oregon, Southeast Portland for 5.5 years. And we moved to Lafayette, 2022, spring of 2022. Even today, I'm not at West Linn every Sunday. It's just 2 Sundays of the month I'm there in person. So that leaves me 2 Sundays to be somewhere else in a religious community. And so I was shopping around for something local and saw the pride flag outside of First Baptist Church. And I thought, first of all, who would not be intrigued by the fact that a Baptist church has a pride flag outside their building? And so I went one Sunday, and to my delight, I just loved the people. They were very welcoming, very friendly. Of course, Pastor Erica is amazing. She preached at my ordination. Just a socially active and engaged
Yeah,
congregation. It's just a great place. And technically, I'm not a member.
yeah, right.
I'm another permanent resident
There
at
you go.
First Baptist.
There you go. There you
So
go.
yeah,
Maybe this is a good time for this, and then I've got a few questions that you and I put together,
yeah.
and we'll dive into those. So imagine a conversation that, let's say, somebody who doesn't go to church, and they're having a conversation with a friend.
Mm,
And somehow maybe the friend has a little bit of religious inclination, and this coworker says, "Hey, can I run something past you?" Let's say that that coworker's name is just Bill,
mhm.
and we'll have Jim be the person who has a little bit of religious inclination. So they get to talking over time. And Bill asks Jim one day, "Hey, can you help me understand the animosity between and Jim, I don't know if this is the right language, but it's the only thing I know. A queer church and a MAGA church.
Mm, mhm.
And I because I've got some neighbors that one is one and the other, and they won't even talk to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I meet them at the mailbox and I can feel
Mhm.
I can feel not only just tension, but I can feel animosity like this could break out into a fight. And I've talked to them individually, and man, they are so fixed on their beliefs. And it seems like so much of their belief system is defined by an opposition to the other.
Mm.
So you got this queer, and again, Jim, I don't know if that's the right way for me to say it, but it's a queer church with maybe a pride flag, and then it's a MAGA church with maybe, let's see, they don't have their own flag. They got hats. Oh, they got an American flag. And so help me understand. And then the Bible, they both talk about the Bible in ways and whatever. And I don't know anything about any of this.
Mhm.
So help me understand, why do they hate each other?
Mm.
What's going on there?
Yeah, and it's
Where does your mind go, Jack?
yeah. Well, I mean, this is being played out all over the United States, right? In neighborhoods, in all over, in communities all over this country. And I think when I think of the word hate, hate is often born out of the word fear. The unknown, the other who has a different way of thinking and believing that I do. Um, I think that unfortunately, a lot of our animosity is fueled by social media. They have chosen on both sides. Have chosen they know the hot potatoes. They know how to exacerbate the differences, whether that be political or theological or cultural. the media has I blame a lot of the media for this. I'm not saying that those differences didn't exist before we had the onslaught of social media, but it just seems to have heightened the anger and animosity that exists between people who are on the left and people who are on the right. I would just say I can just speak from the queer standpoint that I think queer people feel afraid that MAGA judges and MAGA elected officials and the neighbor down the street are going to try to erase us. They're going to try to remove marriage equality from us. They're trying to remove the option to adopt. They're trying to remove cultural symbols like rainbow walks. They've already removed bisexual and transgender from Stonewall, which is a national historic site where the first LGBTQ
Hmm.
protest occurred. So that feels like erasure. And so there's a lot of anger and fear on our side. I can't fully speak for folks who define themselves as MAGA, but I think for them there's anger over immigration. There's frustration and anger over what they believe to be an eroding of the cultural and ethnic moral belief systems of this country, and they believe those of us on the left are responsible for that.
Yes.
And so, and it's just deeply, deeply sad that this is occurring. I tell you how I handle it because all my family are all Trump people, MAGA folks,
Wow.
not unreasonable Trump and MAGA folks. They haven't really fully drank the Kool Aid, but I just try to focus on what is our common love language, and I think our common love language are things like sports or the weather. So we love each other through those things
Hmm.
when we can't talk about the deeper issues. And I'm not saying I couldn't bring up something deeper, but I think that I remember a long time ago there was this beautiful Episcopal campaign to heighten the signal of the Episcopal Church back in the 80s. And I loved one of its quotes, and it said, "Families are bound together not by their ability to agree, but by their ability to love." So you have to focus, in my opinion, you have to focus on what's our common love language. And I think that's how I focus on that when I mean, now more than ever, quite honestly.
Thank you, Jack. Let's go back to that Bill and Jim conversation.
Yeah.
And imagine Jim answers something very similar. Let's say you at that point were Jim, and you're answering Bill, and you're saying, from a religious place, a spiritual place. And Jim's like, wow, that's extremely helpful. And then
Mm-hmm.
imagine that Jim asks Bill, so Bill, what do you think? Because aren't you a clinical therapist?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, will I not take a phone call?
No, sorry.
No, man. What gets screwed up here, I use my phone. I take screenshots of the
Mm-hmm.
questions in your bio, and then it leaves my crazy phone on. So I don't like that at all. So we'll kill that. We'll come back to this. Uh, uh, I'll get confused by the names here, but Jim says to Bill, "You're a clinical therapist, aren't you?" And he says,
Mm-hmm.
"Yes, yes, yes. I teach at a local school and I have a private practice." So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think kind of fuels this religious animosity? And imagine him saying, "There's something that lives underneath this religious stuff about a person's deep, deep discomfort and hatred of somebody who's queer.
Mm-hmm.
There's something deeper, and it gets lost in all the religious and the doctrine and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say they have a conversation, which I actually at that point I'm Bill in that point. As
Mm-hmm.
a therapist, I'm going, this stuff lives underneath this. It's what they were taught from
Mm-hmm.
their families. It's a queer person is strange and dangerous. They're dangerous to our kids. They're dangerous to whatever. And then imagine the two of them say, "Well, what will ever remedy that if they're never going to agree about this book that they both
Mm-hmm.
serve,
Mm-hmm.
and they're never going to agree about church and some concept of God and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be an impossible place to find synergy. Maybe it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But what's something human that could happen between these two people? Do you know a story of somebody who hated somebody queer and all of a sudden said, "Because I've come to love you, or I'm connected to you, or
Mm-hmm.
you care for my daughter, or you care for my son, I have dropped my animosity." Do you know of a story like that, Jack?
Yeah.
Would you
Many,
share one?
many, many, many. One of the best ways to break down walls between people who are, and now my phone's going off, sorry.
That's it happens.
Um, is really developing relational circles or relational moments where queer people and people who are on the other side of that can come together and not see each other just as issues, but as people.
Those people.
And I think when those relationships develop, those familial connections happen, the folks are like, oh, wait a minute, this MAGA person isn't Satan incarnate. Wait a minute, this queer person is a beloved child of God just like me, and so I think that's from a larger conceptual standpoint, I think that's where it starts. In terms of stories, oh my gosh. I mean, like I said, I worked in higher education for 25 years. So I worked with a lot of college students and almost exclusively first year students, freshmen. And one of the things that I remember is a story of a young man that, of course, I was out then. And it was not unusual because I was like the advisor for the local, often, whatever university I was working for, I was often the advisor of the local university student group. And so
Okay.
it was not unusual for someone to make their way to my office and say, I think I'm gay, but I'm too scared to come out to my parents. Because you got to remember, I always worked in the South.
Yeah.
So, and we know how the South is with LGBTQA plus folks. And we would often talk for months, sometimes years,
Wow.
until the point where I'm thinking of this
Wow.
one guy that I mean, we talked years about, like what would it be like if you came out to your parents? What would that scenario? How would you feel? How do you think they react? Do you have a backup plan if it doesn't go well?
Mm.
And then finally, he walked into my office. He said, I'm ready to call my parents. I want to call them and I'll talk to them. And he said, I want you to be there as support.
Wow.
And we put him on speakerphone and we called him. And there were some tears and some sadness and fear for this kid. And it was okay. And they agreed that he would come home the next weekend and that they would talk about it. And those people now are involved in PFLAG. Those parents are now involved in Mama Bears, which is a group of women who get together and do mom hugs at pride celebrations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not saying every story ends up happy, but I think you're never going to know unless you're willing and ready to take that brave step.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Jack, when did you come out?
I came out Martin Luther King Day, 1996, free at last. And I was
Wow.
free in Atlanta, Georgia. And my friend and I were playing pool at this gay bar. At this point, of course, I wasn't saying I was gay. And then just the more and more I spent time in there, and then she just kind of looked at me and she said, I'm just sick of this. She said, I just want to tell you that you're gay and you need to come out. And I was like, oh, wow,
Wow.
wow, you're right. And it was
She was
fine.
direct.
And she was just direct. And it was like, oh wow, that's it. And I came out after that.
Wow.
That's my anniversary.
Man.
January, Martin Luther King Day, 1996, Atlanta,
And
Georgia.
what was the next year like of your life then, Jack? And remind us, how old were you
Yeah,
then?
I was
How
27, I think.
she looks at you straight in the eyes and goes,
Yeah,
"Come on. Come on.
come on out.
Come
Yeah,
on out." Jack comes out.
yeah.
What ensues then in your life, Jack?
Well, it was just a full year of like telling people because
Mhm.
you have to practice. You have to practice coming out to people, and you pick the people who you know are the easiest first.
Wow.
And then you gradually learn how to
Mm.
come out to everybody. And the thing is, you come out to your people your entire life. That never stops. Coming out is never ends. It's an
What do
ongoing
you mean,
process
Jack? What does that mean? Coming out never ends.
because you ultimately there's still always new people in your life, new association, new groups you're
I
part
see.
of.
Okay.
And you have to tell people like, oh, by the way, it's for me. It's easy. I just say, oh, here's my husband. That usually takes care of it. So, but here in the Pacific Northwest, I almost feel like people just it's almost like a non-issue out here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even out here in purple Yamhill County, people just don't
Mm.
assume that you're straight.
Mm. Do you feel like you live where you want to live, where you're supposed to live, at least this region of the country?
Yeah,
Do you feel like it's like I was supposed to live here?
yeah. I also really loved living in Europe. I lived in Belgium for quite a few years, and I really loved it there too.
Wow.
but I love it here too. It's
You thought
really,
about going back to Belgium? I'm sure you have.
oh yeah.
I bet you have. I bet you have.
Uh, yeah. Off the recording, I'll tell you more about that.
Yeah, that's fine. Gotcha, Jack.
Yeah.
All right, Jack. Well, thank you. Let's segue into this recent ordination to be a
Hmm.
deacon.
Yeah.
And I think some folks that aren't that don't know about that tradition would even go, "No, wait a second." And I'm one of these. I mean, I know some about their tradition, but somebody might say, "Jack said something about he decided to not be a priest. He didn't feel called to that. He and he became a deacon, and then he went on to extrapolate what a deacon can do."
Hmm.
I love that. I love that image of getting water at the well and taking it back
Yeah.
out to the people. So he seems to be implying that a priest is not able to do that with the freedom that a deacon can do that, or there's something about that, those titles or
Hmm.
positions. Can you speak about that for a moment?
Yeah. Yeah. Priest, pastor, depending on the tradition you're
There we
using,
go.
are clergy of word and sacrament. So they are charged with preaching and also administering the sacraments,
Hmm.
presiding over the Eucharist. And they are responsible for a congregation and the nurture
Hmm.
and care and support of people who are in the congregation, and also preaching the gospel every Sunday. And deacons, in most traditions, are clergy of word and service. So we are also
Hmm.
called to preach. So I preach occasionally, not as often. That's still also my commonality with my pastor colleague who I work with. But my job is my sacramental work is service, meaning that
Service.
that like I said, I just like to use the imagery of a well, and
It's
I'm
beautiful.
taking the water out to the edges, hopefully feeding and nourishing. And so that looks like okay, on Wednesday we prepare a meal for a ministry called the Father's Heart in Oregon City. So me and a group of people who are members of that church are preparing that meal. Then we go over to the Father's Heart and serve it to mostly men who are mostly houseless. And so that's where the service comes in. And then my job also is to, in my own congregation, this is a big word, but I love to use this word, exhort the members of the congregation to come with me outside
Uh,
the church. We're fed in the building, and so we take our nourishment and strength and we go out the building and serve other people. And so that's the difference between pastors and deacons in a very
Interesting.
simplified way.
Yeah, in a very simplified way. Jack, how did and maybe you've already answered some of this. I think you have. How do deacons help the church connect worship and everyday life in the world?
Well, very short version. The diaconate in its current formation in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America is relatively new in its current iteration. We are now ordained. We have not always been ordained.
Hmm.
We were consecrated for quite a while, and then before that, we were lay pastors. The
That's what I
ELCA,
was familiar
yeah.
with.
Ultimately, in order for us to be in relationship with the Episcopal Church, where we have um, the opportunity to swap out pastors and clergy, the agreement was is that we would ultimately ordain deacons,
Hmm.
that the Lutheran Church would consider deacons clergy. And so, as such, that means that I have a liturgical role. And so, my role in the liturgical Sunday is I sometimes preach. I also set the communion table. I do not I don't
Hmm.
preside. I don't say the words of institution, but I do have a little bit. I read the preface, and so I have a liturgical role, and I also dismiss the congregation at the end of the service.
Wow.
And so those are that, and a couple of other spots. So I have a liturgical role in the Sunday service, and that's actually that's still emerging for deacons in the ELCA. And you had another part of that question.
Hmm. What was it? How do deacons help the church connect worship and everyday life in the world?
Yeah, and I am involved in midweek services, especially during Advent and Lent. So I'm always present because I want people to understand that deacons have a role in the life of the church, inside the church as well as out.
I want to get ahead of myself here. I've got a question, but it'll hang around for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah,
Tell us about, I remember you and I talking about an internship that you did at West Linn in service of becoming an ordained
yeah,
deacon. Tell us a little bit about that. And that's the first part. And the second part is do you feel by this formal ordination, there's things you do and you study and you do and you meet
yeah.
the requirements of the internship. Did it create some kind of extra empowerment within you? But let's start with what's the journey been like from internship to ordination, and this idea of kind of an extra empowerment, because you're essentially doing what you were
Mm-hmm.
doing before, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
one might ask, well, why the formal ordination thing? He was already
Mm-hmm.
doing it. I mean, just give it to him and consecrate him and
All
let him be
right.
on his way. So yeah.
Right. I think the internship was actually very helpful. Part of that internship was also right before that, I did something called CPE, called Clinical Pastoral Education, which basically means that well, for pastors, it means doing hospital chaplaincy for basically
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 months. For me, it was doing chaplaincy within the congregation. And that ultimately became part of my job. That never stopped. I continue to visit people in nursing homes and hospitals, and I still
You'll
do
be doing
that.
that this week.
Yeah, I'm going
Yeah,
to be doing it
gotcha.
this week. Yeah. And it's really helpful. The internship was very helpful because for me, it was at the end. It's like everything that I've studied, all of the classes and all the theory and all those pieces, it sort of culminated in the internship. Like, okay, you've got the grounding. Now put it to use, apply it, and see what that experience is like. And so I actually spent a good bit of time while I was interning, meeting with my spiritual director a little bit and a couple of other people to have a good bit of um, discerning what those experiences were like. What went well, what didn't go well. How is this landing with you now that you're actually doing this work
Uh,
and you're at the end and you're right on the edge of being ordained. So I found an internship and CP to be very helpful because it's really where the rubber hits the road, quite honestly. You're
Okay.
doing it. You're doing the thing. You really are. And the beauty of the Lutheran tradition is that there are three different requirements that something called a candidacy committee, they sort of walk alongside you in the process. So there's entrance, where you were entered into candidacy and say, thumbs up, you're ready to try this out. Then about halfway through, you have the endorsement interview, where you go and talk about, okay, you're about midway to 2/3 through. You're doing it. What does it feel like? And then at the end, you have the approval interview where they say, okay, reflect on all of it. And are you ready to be ordained? And so there's lots of processes in place to help you think critically, theologically, spiritually, like, okay, along the way, how are you feeling about this? And then at the end, they sign off and say, you're ready to go.
Jack, did you have any hesitations along the way? I'm thinking of somebody asking you, and I know it was in the system, in the water, if you will. Hey,
Yeah.
are you ready? Let's go forward. Let's go. But was there ever a moment where you experienced it as if somebody was asking, are you ready? And Jack's like, I'm not sure. I'm not
Yeah.
sure I want to do this. Did you have hesitancy?
Sure. And I think that's actually very normal to have doubts like, oh my gosh, is this the right
Hmm.
thing to do? Like this is an enormous responsibility. Um and yeah, sure, I had doubts because I've been doubting for decades. Like I spent 25 denial doing higher work in higher education, which was a great profession. But ultimately, this really is where I was called to be, and that's the conclusion I came to at the very end. Yes, I have this spaciousness about living in and visiting and
Yeah.
being part of different traditions, which really enrich my experience, and I think quite honestly will enrich people who I work with because guess what? Not everybody in the Pacific Northwest is Lutheran, right? They come from any number of traditions or no traditions at all.
Right.
And so I think that it's going to serve me well as I live into this diaconate.
And how about the kind of the extra oomph of empowerment, or it's kind of like, well, I got a double portion now. I mean, does it feel to you as if, you know, I don't know, just like it's more real or something, or more empowered?
Yeah, I think I really pay attention to symbols. I think that's why I love the liturgical church. And I just like caught myself yesterday. I have this. I'm literally, when I say this, my office already had a full length mirror in there. I didn't put it in there, but it has one. And I just caught myself in the mirror and I had on my clerical collar and my stole. And I thought, oh, wow, this is like real.
This
Like
is
this
real.
really happened. And so I think symbols, like I said earlier, point beyond themselves, something greater beyond themselves. And I feel like, okay, this really did happen.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I think the second question I have, I think, Jack, you've already answered it. Third question: why is the ministry of deacons especially important today let's emphasize today, as the church learns to serve in new, creative, and inclusive ways. I
Yeah.
like the relevancy of this.
Yeah.
Why is the ministry of deacons especially important today as the church learns to serve in new, creative, and inclusive ways?
Well, let's just be really honest. The church as an institution is dying and has been dying since the mid 60s, quite honestly.
Wow.
Not Christianity, not Lutheranism, not the Baptist church, but the church as an institution is dying. It was created out of a model that worked right after the post World War II. That's a model, we had Sunday schools and we had graded curriculum and we had all of those things and we had this well oiled machine because people said, you know what, I just moved to West Linn. I'm Lutheran, so let me find the local Lutheran church. And that reality is gone. That is no longer the case.
People aren't operating that way, is what you're saying.
No, people are not operating that anymore. So, in some ways, it's kind of beautiful in a way because the people who walk in your doors now want to be there, and so in some ways, it's
Hmm.
kind of refreshing. But the church and the role of the deacon, I think the deacon can be seen as someone who has not historically been up front, been the clerical role where people are often triggered by pastor or minister or bishop, but deacons are kind of new and fresh. And so people don't have the baggage connected with deacons. And so I think we can be the bridge, we can be the connector to invite people into our communities, which are hopefully communities where these people can be loved and celebrated and nurtured. And I think that's a role that we can play here in the 21st because we're the ones out on the streets talking to people and connecting with people. Not to say that pastors aren't engaged in the community, but
Sure.
that's very much the ministry of deacons. I like to call the pride flag on our building. We have a pride flag on our building. I called the pride flag. I've actually nicknamed it the second deacon. I think the pride flag is a deacon because it people that keep coming in our door say, I'm here because I saw that flag on your church. And so
Mm.
I'm like, the deacon, the pride flag's doing deacon work too. I'm not the only one.
Wow. What's drawing people, the people that you speak of, not by name, but what are drawing people? What's the flag drawing them to? Are they coming out in your space, or they have a grandchild or a son or daughter or
Mhm.
whatever? Or are they just saying, you know what, I really want to live open-hearted and inclusive? I mean, what's drawing people to a pride flag at a church?
I think all the above. I mean, we have people who came in because they were either LGBTQIA plus or their family member was, or like you just said, sometimes like, okay, pride flag means openness, inclusive. Oftentimes we sing the song Draw the Circle Wide, which we sing at
Yes.
First Baptist.
Yes.
And I think the pride flag is, I mean, like that to me, that's the exclamation mark at the end of that. And I think people just feel like it's a safe place to be.
You and I are from the South.
Uh-huh.
And you referred to this might be it's such an obvious answer that it doesn't even need to be asked the question. What is it, or what are the ingredients to why there's so much disgust and hatred of queer people?
Hmm.
What is it? I probably know, but I want to hear it from you, Jack.
In the South or just in general?
I think in the South, and then we're going to import some of that that's
Yeah.
going on even across the country. But let's just
Hmm.
say the South is like a major factory of it.
Hmm.
It's kind of like this is where we make the animosity. We
Hmm.
make it here, and then we just disperse it out.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
What is it?
What is it? I think for one thing, I think it's our history. I think Southerners have always been a part of mostly agrarian societies. And as a result, there's less access to good education. And for a long time, the South was a very homogenous society. In some ways, it still is. And so there's not been a lot of access to cultural diversity. You would have to go to a city, even today, you would need to have to go to a city to find that. And so I think there's been a lot of insular, siloed off ways of thinking and believing. Like we just said earlier, how many Southerners do you run out here? I don't think Southerners travel very much. Because they're very comfortable in their own spaces. And I think after the Civil War, the South has circled the wagons for 2 centuries. You know, it's us versus the
Yeah.
rest of the United States.
Yeah.
And by God, we're just going to be ourselves. And we don't want anything any different. We don't want to consider anything that the North would consider. We want to be the opposite of whatever that is.
And the North would be not just geographic, but it's just anything other than what we are.
Yeah, anything other than
It's
and
adversarial. Yeah.
I love to quote this. I love to quote William Faulkner, and he said, "The Civil War, the war between the states, not the embers have not died. It's not. I mean, it's the Civil War. It's not even past." And that's a paraphrasing, basically saying the war is still not over. The Civil War is still being fought today, and people laugh at me when I'm saying that. I'm like, pay attention. Pay attention to the fact that on January 6th, there was a Confederate flag being waved inside the U.S. Capitol building. I assure you, the Civil War is not over for them. It is not.
Nor is racism, and nor is black
No,
hatred and white supremacy and all of that. I mean, and
no.
you know, it. I heard it said the other day, and I was thinking about it, and somebody said it, and I went, yeah, I've been thinking that too. Is I don't know if we should phrase it as at least we know now that it's real. We knew it before, but boy, has it shown itself in our day and age. It's here. Jack, this is a big, big question to ask you
Mm-hmm.
with a few minutes left, but just go for it, man.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with the Bible? The Bible sits in the Bible
Mm-hmm.
is your West Linn. I'm going to make some
Uh-huh.
statements, and if they're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
correct, tell me. Sure, of Lutheranism, but
Mm-hmm.
the Bible is the book of your church,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
What do you do with if this book could, what am I trying to say? Well, let's first start with this book is shared. We'll kind of use this, and it's not this simple, but we'll use it for conversation's sake. This kind of Southern mindset, and we know how the Bible is used in so
Mm-hmm.
many of those communities. And then you have the same book, and
Mm-hmm.
over here, we're going to use left.
Yeah.
It's interpreted so differently. It's held so differently. It's studied so differently. And
Mm-hmm.
then on the right, it's held in a way I saw recently. It was kind of, to me, it was a gruesome picture. I
Mm-hmm.
saw somebody that I don't want to give details because I don't want to point to the person, but I went to the website of the church that this individual pastors at, and I don't know what happened to this person, but this person is so far right and further right. I mean, this person trained under John MacArthur,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole mindset. But there was one picture on the church website where he's holding, and this was somebody who was very dear to me and maybe still is, but he had his right hand just clenched on the Bible and he was holding
Mm-hmm.
it to his side, and there was a up close shot of him holding this Bible. And I thought, that looks like a weapon to me. That's a weapon in your hand. And then it's that same book sits in your church and it's not a weapon. Well, I don't even know what I'm asking, except I see this, the
Mm-hmm.
way the Bible's, how do you read the Bible, Jack?
Yeah. Well, I think that even Martin Luther said, I think this is Latin, sola scriptura, Bible, alone, authority.
Hmm.
So, Martin Luther, the founder of Lutheranism, certainly believed in the authority of Scripture. But as time has gone along, many of us who are mainline Protestant Christians started paying attention to the scholarship of Scripture and the archaeological and anthropological um, effects or understandings of Scripture, where it came from, how it was developed, what is the context. Like that is the first thing you hear in a Lutheran seminary, for example, is context, who was writing and who were they writing for? And
Hmm.
can you step away from the fact that there weren't people named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? We don't even know the names of the real authors. And the fact, can you also be comfortable with the fact that maybe there's more than one author for many of the Gospels and other books in the Bible? And so I guess I'm just trying to say, those of us who see ourselves in that camp don't want to be cherry picking scriptures to build up a cultural belief as biblically grounded. Like, many times, if you notice, many of those pastors will choose a topic like homosexuality, and then they'll go around and pick one sentence
Oh,
verses
man.
to build their argument.
Oh
And
boy.
they are absolutely, positively just taking it all way out of context, not paying attention to who's saying it, who it was being said to, none of that. And I think that that's the challenge, is that we pay attention to scholarship. We pay attention to those things. We're not trying to, it's all, and we believe in scripture. We just don't believe in the inerrancy of scripture. And I think that it's just dangerous to do that. It's dangerous not to pay attention to the full scope and breadth of what the Bible is. There's lots of beauty and truth in scripture, in the Bible. For me personally, I love the hidden stories. And this isn't a hidden story, but I love the story of Naomi and Ruth. We don't hear about Naomi and Ruth much, but it's definitely a queer story. It is the story of two women moving out of a country together. And if you were to hand that same scripture to a conservative pastor, he'd never see that.
Oh no.
None, not
Jack, you would be attacked.
yeah,
You would
totally.
be. I mean, if I was that individual
Yeah,
and we were having this podcast and you said that, I would. There's a possibility I would come unglued
yeah,
to defend the text and to call you a heretic.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've been called that. I mean, you have been called that, but I'm sure you sometimes have been even directly called that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I knew that was a big question. It's one that I wrestle with. I had a friend call me recently from the other side of the country,
Hmm.
and he grew up in kind of loose church, if you will, loose meaning kind of went every once in a while. Had a conversion experience in
Mm,
his college days. Had no orientation to the Bible. The Bible had nothing to do with his conversion experience. It was a
yeah,
mystical encounter
yeah,
similar to what I had as a high
yeah.
school student. He said that he recently, after going to so many different Bible churches, like we're kind of describing, that take the Bible literal and whatever, he goes to a progressive church and he called me a week ago and he said, I love where I go to church, Doug. I love the whole thing. But he said, I sat in a class this morning, kind of a Sunday school adult class thing. And he said, it was weird because he said, it's the first time I've been there now for about 3 or 4 years. And he said, I haven't gone to any classes. And he said, I sat in the class and I listened to, and he said, I understand enough about progressive Christianity
Hmm.
and conservative Christianity. We'll kind of use those. And he
Yeah.
said, I listened to, and he said, they were all older people. He's probably, I'm soon to be 67. He's like 65 or something.
Hmm.
He said, most of them were in their 70s or older.
Hmm.
And he said, it was amazing to listen to them talk about their faith, but he said there was something missing. He said it took me a week to kind of figure it out. He said it irritated me. He said that one person in the class said, "I'm not into Jesus, but I like Jesus's way." But he said,
Yeah.
there's something about being into Jesus that's good. That's
Mm,
like this because he had this conversion experience and it's well shaped within him. He doesn't like he has
yeah.
Jesus in his back pocket, but it's like there's this intimacy he has with. He even said to me on the phone, he said it sounds really weird to say this and I don't think this would be very welcome in that class, but he said I have this intimacy with my Savior. But he said
Mhm.
I didn't hear any of that in that class or whatever. There was just kind of this intellectual, and he said it felt to me like it lacked the teeth of a
Mm,
commitment. Like he wanted to. He said I felt uncomfortable, but I wanted to ask them, "Have you encountered the risen Christ?" And he said, I'm kind of a mess right now, but I'll continue to go to the church. I love it and whatever. But he said that was a facet of my conservative time of being shaped that's not in this progressive community. I don't hear
mhm.
anybody saying, I got saved. What are your thoughts on that, Jack?
Wow, that's a lot.
I
Right.
know it is.
It's a great question, though. I mean, it's a lot, and it's a great question. Let's see if I can do it justice. I will just say that I think even within mainline Protestantism, there is a spectrum of belief about the whole concept of have you accepted Jesus as your Savior, uh, and thereby converted to Christianity. And so there are certainly large swaths of people in mainline churches that are very much in line with that belief. But I think it follows a spectrum. Quite honestly, I think there are people who believe that on one side. Then I believe there are many people who don't believe in substitutionary atonement. They don't believe that Jesus Christ had to die
Right.
for our sins to be saved. Nobody is denying the crucifixion of Jesus or the ascension of or the resurrection or ascension of Jesus, but thinking about it in terms of that substitutionary atonement context doesn't work for a lot of people anymore. It doesn't for them, it doesn't diminish who Jesus is or what his role was, but it's paying attention to this sense of that it required a violent act, a blood act, in order to save humanity.
Hmm.
Because when you start deconstructing what happened there about God's relationship to the Trinity and who Jesus is and the Holy Spirit, it gets messy for a lot of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And so maybe what he's experiencing is people who, just don't live into their relationship with God or Jesus in the same way
In the
he
same
does.
way.
It doesn't mean that either one is incorrect. Everybody has to pick the experience that resonates with them. And that may be
That's helpful,
his
Jack.
experience. I mean, that's
That's
just my opinion. I don't
No,
know.
no, that's helpful. Yeah, I'll share that. It's interesting because I think I know this. He would no longer subscribe to the atonement theory,
Mm,
but he talks about this intimacy with Jesus
mm-hmm,
that he has, and it's even outside of the service. It's like that's the way he thinks about going
mm-hmm.
through the world. And he said, I know I was formed that way in my
Yeah,
discipleship, but it's like it's in my blood.
yeah.
And I'm just kind of wondering, can I come out in this church with that and not be
Mhm.
seen as, oh, so you're one of those kind of radical Jesus Savior
Yeah,
piece and whatever. So he's
yeah.
kind of struggling with some of that.
Well, first of all, I think that's beautiful that that's been his experience. I often say, I mean, I remember one of the first questions the candidacy committee ever asked me is, what was my relationship with Jesus? And
Wow.
how did I feel about that? I said, for me, Jesus has saved me over and over again, time and time again, all throughout my life in small and large ways. And so for me, salvation doesn't always necessarily mean the whole
That's
Jesus
good.
died on the cross, but Jesus was present with me at different junctures along the way for me in life. And quite honestly, I just said to the committee, I let Jesus be whoever Jesus needs to be in my life. I don't try to
Mm,
prescribe that or
that's
let other
beautiful.
people try to tell me what that looks like. And
Boy,
they
that's
liked it, so here I am.
I like it too, Jack. Jack, let's end with this. What's it
Yeah.
like to be not only a queer Christian, a queer deacon, but a married queer
Hmm.
deacon? What's that like in the world?
Well, it's really always an adventure because my husband is not Christian. He is spiritual, has a deep, rich spiritual journey. He grew up in the church, but ultimately decided Christianity wasn't his path. And so we just, like, almost every day is an ongoing ecumenical conference. We are always tackling what things that he believes or things that I believe. And we actually have a lot of commonality in terms of belief. And so, from the context of being married and thinking about and being in uh, an ecumenical marriage, it's really exciting to
That's cool.
it really is. And, sometimes it's hard because, like, people in my neighborhood is probably a purple neighborhood.
I know a little bit about Lafayette.
Yeah, it's kind of a purple neighborhood. It's a brand new neighborhood. And so there's this mix of MAGA and not MAGA. And so they really don't know what to do with me. They're like, wait a minute, you're gay, but wait a minute, you're Christian. And now you're ordained. Like, how does
And
that
you're
work?
married.
And you're married. It looks like Beaver Cleaver world, but just not quite the same way they
That's really
expect.
interesting.
So it's
Yeah,
it's always an adventure.
that's really cool.
Yeah,
I had another question, Jack. It's gone. The question's gone.
it's all right.
Jack, anything else that you want to loop back to that you'd like to say a few things about that you said or something that I said that you just feel compelled to say a few more things about?
Yeah. I think we've talked a lot about personal journeys and theological concepts and how we live our daily lives as people in this world. And I would just say to whoever's listening that church, as we call it, is evolving. The church is changing. There are bigger and louder voices that claim to represent Christianity that are white Christian nationalists. And maybe that's your path or maybe it's not. But just, do your homework before you engage with any religious Christian community, do your homework and make sure that there's a residency, make sure there's an alignment in a community that's going to be supportive and nurturing to you on your journey. My biggest advice is do your homework, educate yourself.
That's good. Jack, this has been great. I
Yeah,
really appreciate it. I learned something. I always learn something in
me
these.
too.
Well, thank you. Good, man. Well,
Thank you so much.
oh gosh, Jack, yeah, and we're neighbors. We even talked about my wife and I getting with you and
Yeah,
Christopher, and
we would love that.
we just I asked a young Hispanic woman here in McMinnville a few months ago that works at the dentist office where I attend,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "So, Maria, where do you go for Mexican food in McMinnville? Because there's a lot of selection."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Oh, I." She was kind of apologetic. I I don't go anywhere. And I said, well, there's a story there. And she said, my grandmother taught us to cook and in Mexico. And
Yeah.
she said, we make our own tortillas and we make our own
Mm.
food and whatever. And I said, so do you ever go out and eat? And she said, oh, and she was very, very kind of adamant. She said, the only place that we will go eat Mexican food or Hispanic food or whatever is in Lafayette.
Uh-huh.
We go to Martha's.
Yep.
And I said, really? And she said, oh, yes. She said, it's the most authentic you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
in a restaurant. So my wife and I were coming through on Monday. We were coming through Lafayette and finally decided and had time to stop for lunch. And man, it was good.
Oh, it's
It
really
was
good. Yeah.
it was really good, man.
Yeah, it is.
Just a simple place.
Yeah, it
Just a
is.
really simple place. So
It
that's kind of
is.
our new that's our new spot.
Yeah. There's also a really good one in on the square in
Oh,
Dayton.
okay.
It's a one-woman show, and she cooks everything from scratch.
Whoa. What's the name of that
I
place, Jack?
can't think of the name of it, but it's easy to find. It's the only Mexican restaurant on the square in
It's a
Dayton.
one woman.
Show. Yeah.
Man, that reminds me when I was at Western Kentucky University, there was a place called Mary's, and
Mm-hmm.
Mary cooked all the food, served all the food.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I mean, just, all the Southern stuff, man.
Oh, wonderful.
And
That sounds
sometimes
great.
you'd get to Mary's and it wouldn't be open. It wouldn't be open for
Oh,
three,
yeah.
4 days, and then she'd open it. She cooked it all, and she was kind of ornery because you didn't want a
Yeah.
special order, man.
No.
And
No.
all she served really was just college students because it was inexpensive and it
Oh,
was
yeah.
good. Man, I can't wait to go to that place in Dayton,
Mm-hmm.
Jack.
You should
Thank you.
go.
All right, brother.
That's good.
Well, it's been great, Jack. Thank you. Stay with me
Yes.
so we make sure it uploads. Send this to whoever you want to send it to.
Okay.
I'll send it to you first, and it'll be in a YouTube format, and then I'll throw it on Facebook if you're cool with that, and we'll take it
Yeah,
from
yeah,
there.
yeah.
All right, Jack. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, man.